Thank you. So, good morning. I'm thrilled to be with you here this morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. I love when I get a chance to speak early at a conference because I feel like it's a chance to have 100 conversations at the same time. So it's a lovely opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you. And it's a broad theme that I was given this morning to talk about, and so I've been writing and rewriting the different things that I could cover. So this will be an interesting 12 minutes. I think I have a lot of different things to share. So first of all, my name's John Wonderlich. I'm policy director at the Sunlight Foundation. We're about 6 years old, and Sunlight was founded as focused on transparency and accountability for the federal government in Washington, D.C. That we interpret that as meaning technology-driven transparency, because that's often where the most change is coming from. And 2006, it turns out, was a great time to think about what it means to build an accountable and transparent government with new technology. In the time since then, we've expanded dramatically. We have a staff of about 45, and we've also extended our programmatic work to include international activity as well as state and local work within the U.S. So we're now covering a lot of different topics. So I want to talk through three different assumptions that I think we bring to this work that we hear about a lot at conferences and contexts like this. Talk about how I interpret what those assumptions mean, and then use that to ask a few questions about how I think we all need to approach this work and where there's tension in how we approach our shared work. So the first assumption that I'd like to talk about is the rise of citizen technologists. And this gets talked about a lot. This is the idea of the app. Some of my favorite examples there, my colleague and friend Josh Tauber in the US in 2004 was trying to track intellectual property legislation in the US Congress as it related to radio on the internet radio. And he said, boy, it's annoying to go check every day the Library of Congress website and see if the bill moved, so maybe I'll just write a scraper and put it in a database on my computer. And as long as I'm doing that, I may as well scrape all of the bills in the Library of Congress and put it on my computer. And as long as I'm doing that, I may as well give everyone access to it. And the process of doing that on his own led to the website GovTrack. And even now, if you search for any bill in the US Congress, you're just as likely to end up on Josh's website as you are to end up in the Library of Congress's website, despite their $400 million a year budget. And the reason for that is his site is more reliable and more useful and has more features. Now that may be because the Library of Congress is encumbered by bureaucratic prerogatives or whatever it is that holds them back. But Josh was a graduate student in linguistics, trying to get his doctorate in linguistics, which took him a long time, maybe partly because he was distracted on the nights and weekends by the thousands of people every day that were following Google searches to his copies of legislation in Congress. But there's a very strong example there, and that's one of the first ones that I encountered in my work in this field in 2006, was this young sort of introverted but incredibly intelligent person that was playing this public service just with something that he was scratching his own itch, and suddenly anyone searching for a bill on Google in the US was getting his website. So it's, to me, really inspirational. There are tons of other examples. What Open City is doing in Chicago, I'll let Juan Pablo speak for themselves, but if you go to chicagolobbyist.org, you can see an incredibly powerful view on what lobbying looks like in Chicago. Or Sunlight's Bob Lannon, who at an app contest was trying to hack together a way where, so we already have it where you can hold up your cell phone when there's a song playing and it tells you what the song is so that you can buy it. He built a system called Ad Hoc and ended up getting hired by Sunlight to finish it, where you can do that with any political ad. So if there's some group that's buying ads and you want to see who's paying for them, you just hold it up, it recognizes the audio, and matches it against an FEC database that we maintain. But that started as a citizen project at an apps contest in Philadelphia. So that's the first theme I want to look at is citizen technologists. And I think that there's actually something broader there than just coders building apps. Part of that comes out of my personal experience. I was recent graduate from Penn State with a philosophy degree, trying to figure out what to do with myself in 2006. And when Nancy Pelosi won back the House, I was writing online about what it might mean to have a more transparent House of Representatives and a more transparent Congress. An incredible stroke of luck or something, one of Pelosi's staffers read my blogging on Daily Kos about that fact, and it led to me moving to DC and getting hired at Sunlight. And it also led, within 2 weeks with no intervention from me, to the S1, the Honest Leadership and Open Government Act in the Senate, being amended to include changes that I was recommending as just a person in central Pennsylvania blogging in the middle of the night. So that's when, for the first time, transcripts of committee hearings in the U.S. Senate were required to be public. So that was just something that I happened to be interested in. I had no business writing about it, but there was a sort of audacity of like, let's see how this works and read the rules. And it just turned out no one had asked that question of the U.S. Senate before. So the lesson I want to draw about citizen technologists, I have a couple. First is that blogging is not dead. I hear all the time, I think there was this idea in 2005 and 2006, probably because the left was united against George Bush and finding an outlet in communities online, that sort of there's this new force and you can say anything you want through blogs. And then many of the people that were doing that got sucked into newspapers, and there was a sort of first wave of professionalization that fell out of the blogosphere. We don't even really call it that anymore. But I think that context has not disappeared, and it's just as vital as it ever was. And my job advice continues to be write about whatever you're interested in as powerfully as you can, and good things will probably come of it. Okay, so that's the first lesson I want to draw is that even more broadly than the idea of citizen technologists is I think there's an ethos of involvement or empowerment that happens around this kind of governance reform work, especially when it's driven by technology. So that brings us to the second point I want to make, is that our institutions are changing. So two quick examples. Number one, commercial publishers have been an essential source of information about how our democracy functions forever, and it's also a force that props up unfair access to information. So when you look at West or Lexis or CQ or any of the places where people get information about Congress, if there's a price for accessing it, the amount of unfairness is proportional to the price it costs to access that information. And a lot of our mission is to reduce that disparity down to zero so that everyone has similar access. So on that second theme, the idea is that our roles and our ability to be agents in the world is being changed by technology and transparency work, and so our institutions are changing as a result. The third theme that I want to talk about is accountability and oversight, which is also deeply changing through the kind of work that we're pursuing. My favorite example here is that if you look up, we call it PPACA, but it's I don't remember what that stands for, Obamacare, Patient Protection of whatever. It's the healthcare bill. If you look it up and you do a find-in page, which by the way is my favorite legal research tool, is Control F. If you do a find-in page for the word website in the healthcare bill, you get 118 mentions of the word website in that bill. Now it's a long bill, it's like 900 pages if you find the copy on GovTrack or the government printing office. But 118 times in a bill that's not about technology is amazing. And that's not just about the exchanges where people are searching for a healthcare bill. That's also about disclosure requirements to try to root out conflicts of interest between doctors and pharmaceutical companies. And it's about Congress performing oversight of the bill as it was passed. And it's about price control, it's about tons of things. But that gives you a sense of the way that digital disclosure is suddenly at the heart of the way that we're regulating things. And in my view, increasingly, all of our most important public policy questions are being litigated through a different question than they were before. It's not just what should the government be doing or how should we control this. It's what can we know about it, what should we know about it, and as a result, what can we build to try to fix it, and what can we do with the information that we know as a result. So if you look at the drones debate, this is entirely about public knowledge of the legal justifications for the targeted drone attacks. The same is true for whether or not we know whether the president has authorized the killing of U.S. citizens. It's about the limits of public knowledge. Same is true for Sunshine Week, so the Freedom of Information Act debate and how well the Obama administration is complying. Also money and politics and questions at the heart of political power in the U.S. are dictated and governed by this question. Right now, there's an embarrassed President Obama is walking back the scheme to have Organizing for America accept unlimited contributions from corporations, and now they're saying they're just going to accept smaller contributions and disclose them online. So literally the question, what should the public know and how should they be able to work with it, is determining how large the checks are that the president is accepting from well-heeled funders. So that's the third theme, is that the way we approach public policy questions is almost entirely governed now, or completely changed by the question, what should we be able to know and what we'll be able to build and do with that information. All right, so quickly, because I have only a couple minutes left, some of the tensions that I have are questions as a result of the things that I see at the heart of our work. So quickly, I'm just going to run through these tensions. Number one, how do we build grassroots support? And there's a tension between grassroots support and grassroots support that is engineered. And I think this is a tricky problem for nonprofits to deal with. The second tension is between architecture and agility. So anyone who's managed a web development project is probably familiar with this. If you ask someone, do you want a minimum viable product that's releasable within one day and then frequent iteration afterward, the answer is yes. If you ask, do you want something that is linked open data and integrated with a semantic web and perfectly organized so that it works with everyone else's projects, the answer is yes. These are totally opposite things. This is a terrible tension. There's no rule book for how to deal with that. The third one, which I think is the same problem in a different context, is the tension between standardization and innovation. So are all these projects going to be intertwined with each other? Is every city going to use the same data for the way they schedule their city council meetings? Or are we going to say, congratulations, small town, for making up a new system that took you only a week to build and you're going to iterate off of it? Those are different approaches. It's hard to reconcile between them. Another tension is between being objective analysts of how transparency and innovation are working in the world, and on the other hand, recognizing that everything you say is inherently political. So if you want to create change, and praise is a means of creating change and political will, how do you balance that against your obligation to be an objective judge? Another one, I've got two more, another two. So first is you want processes to be collaborative and as consultative as possible, but you also want to be able to have the audacity or the initiative to just say things confidently and refine your thoughts after you say them. And I think one of the reasons that I was able to make the changes I did before I was involved at Sunlight was that I only had the internet. I didn't have an introduction to some group that had worked on this issue for 10 years so that I could schedule a meeting for next week. It was, I will read the Senate rules right now and figure out what's happening. And that's really tough. It's the same question NGOs face around coalition work. Everyone wants coalitions to happen so that we don't make our work redundant, but at the same time, where's the line of diminishing returns around organizing and planning beforehand? So the question that I have, and this is kind of an open-ended talk, but the question that I have is how do we as coordinators and thinkers and academics and funders and organizers and advocates balance between those different poles in our work, the coordinative and the radical poles in our work, so that the ecosystem can be as healthy as possible and people can innovate while also being coordinated into something that empowers them to do broader work. So thanks very much.